The issue of vetting school staff has once again come under spotlight with recent incidents raising doubts about the efficiency of the current vetting system. However, Deputy Director for HR Planning in the Department of Education, Tsekere Maponya, argues that the vetting process is a serious measure of ensuring school safety.
This is such a serious issue, the issue of safety in our schools. Such a serious issue that I think it cannot be left to one entity or organization. So in this case, the Department of Education. I do think that is everyone's responsibility. If you have a child or you know of a child that goes to a school in your township, in your suburb, wherever it is, I think you also have the right to ensure or to demand that everybody who works in that school is actually someone who is less likely, or the likelihood of them being an offender are minimal. So I think there's a role to play also from the parent side, especially with the SGBs in our schools, to ensure that everyone is actually the right person to be in our schools. But also the Department of Education also works with police stations. So there's this arrangement where like local schools will work with local police stations to really just address any issues of security and even beyond that. So that if a case arises in a school, then you can quickly call somebody in the police station. And because there's that relationship between the school and the police station, then they can quickly respond, or they can even support like with campaigns on an ongoing basis. So that's part of it. But perhaps there's more that can be done. Because of the nature of this work that we started in 2022, is that we have not moved at the kind of pace that we had anticipated. There are challenges, at the police stations. Police stations work for a certain number of hours in a day, or they'll tell you we're not doing fingerprints after whatever time. I'm not going to say what time. It varies from police station to police station, because as you can imagine, a police station is a very busy place. People go there to record cases. People go there to get their documents certified. People go there for various reasons, so they become overwhelmed. So I think as a manner, in a way of trying to manage the traffic, they are saying to us that we will not be able to help you beyond a particular time. But also, you must also recall that our teachers are in schools for the whole day. So you can't say, skip a half a day today, go and get this thing done, because if you do that, what are you saying about our learners? But the issue is that the numbers are high. So our current focus and energies are really just to ensure that the 500,000 that we know of that are currently in the system are vetted. And I think it will be easier to say what then once we've gone through the 500,000. Because in my view, you cannot be saying that you want to keep doing this on an ongoing basis when you are still struggling to get off the ground. I think as soon as we're off the ground, we have sufficient numbers of our educators vetted, then we can start saying, how often do you want to do it? But also, like I said to you, the other thing that we're ensuring is that each new entrant gets vetted against the register before they even start. So in a way, you are tackling two groups. You're tackling the new teachers in particular, and then you are also dealing with the ones that are in the system already. Then with time, once you've gone through the entire cohort, then we can talk about regularity as well.
He emphasizes that parents share an equal responsibility in making sure their children are safe in schools.
I think looking at the current processes, I mentioned the role of the South African Council for Educators. I think for me, that's like the entry point. That's where I think we need to be critically looking at everyone who comes into our schools from that point onwards. The second layer, I would say, because SACE is an entity on its own, even though we do work together with SACE, but every department of education that wants to hire someone, I think they also have a responsibility to ensure that such people are vetted thoroughly, to ensure that we don't have sex offenders or we don't have people with criminal records in our schools as such. And I think the third layer is what you asked earlier, is to say that once we have dealt with this backlog of many educators that still have to be vetted and public service staff in our schools, I think we need to then get to a point where on a regular basis we do regular checks just to ensure that everyone is appropriately placed to be in our schools in particular. But again, I will never, I think, stop talking about the role of our parents. I think as parents also, when you take your child to school, we cannot leave them at the gate and go to work or wherever we go during the day. I think it's our responsibility also to ensure, over and above ensuring that this teacher that is teaching your child is properly qualified in the first place in terms of their credentials, academic credentials. You also want to be sure that this person indeed does not have any, tendencies towards sexual offenses, or like you were asking earlier, mental issues that could prop up. And if that happens, I think that has to be dealt with accordingly.
Maponya says securing convictions in misconduct cases involving teachers and minors is challenging, as students are often reluctant to testify and endure secondary trauma of reliving their experiences.
The department cannot do anything outside of what is provided for in process and in law as well. So there's a process that's been provided for through the Education Labour Relations Council, but if the parties involved don't want to go through the entire process, then there isn't much that the department can do. Because at the end of the day, you have to prove somebody wrong or guilty before you can take any action. I think in South Africa we do speak about, the principle of being innocent until proven guilty, and this also applies as well. So it may be that a teacher, and this happens, people get accused of molestation or sexual abuse, teachers do, but you can't dismiss them on the basis of an accusation. It must be tested, and at the end of the day, through the process that is in place, they must be found guilty. Then that's when you can act, because then otherwise you are victimizing people wrongfully because there hasn't been a fair process, so to say. The person who has been accused gets taken through the process, and then the process may find them guilty, in which case then they get dismissed. But sometimes in the process, what happens is that parents are not willing for their children to give evidence, because that is like, I think it's called secondary victimization. I'm not sure, I might be saying it wrong. But the child has gone through the trauma of being molested, for argument's sake. Now you want to take them through a process where they must relive that, and it's a child. So some parents sometimes, kind of like think, what, this is terrible that has happened to my child, but I don't want to put them through more trauma by taking them through this process. Even though in terms of the arrangements by the Education Labour Relations Council, there's a process where a child can give evidence on camera, so they don't have to be like in a formal setting like we are sitting here now, where they have to provide evidence. It's a very kind of like protected space, so to say.
Maponya says the Department of Education is committed to ensuring that learning environments are safe, preventing learners from potential harm.
We, as the Department of Basic Education and the provincial education departments, actually we are committed to ensure that everyone that gets appointed in our schools is a rightful person. They don't have any criminal record or any such cases which will then put our children in harm's way. And we are currently, and we've been doing this since 2022, we've been putting efforts in place to ensure that everyone who gets appointed in our schools gets vetted, whether it be against the National Register for Sex Offenders or the Child Protection Register. So those are the two main things, the two main registers that we are focusing our energies on. I've spoken about the role of SACE in terms of them ensuring that people who get appointed in the sector also do not have any criminal records. So I think from that perspective, we are doing what we should be doing. What I think, if it is true, if it is the case, I think we need to verify this, that the register is now public. Then I think it assists us in the sense that parents, like I said earlier on, can then go and request to have access to the register and say, we want to check that this 50 educators in our school, whether it be a basketball coach or cricket coach or whatever coach, swimming coach, polo, hockey, whatever it is, we want to be sure that this person, they have been appointed in our school. We want to be sure that this person does not have any record, which can then put our children in harm's way.
Maponya suggests that making the NRSO public could help eliminate the lengthy process of school vetting.
So that could actually be very helpful, because then it will eliminate this lengthy process that we are now having. It's not lengthy per se, it's just there are stumbling blocks along the way. There are, bottlenecks that we encounter along the way. So that kind of thing would assist. But I think it is important that we actually go and have a discussion with the Department of Justice and verify this, and also just to get an understanding of what are the implications. So does that mean that we will be able to be more efficient and effective in checking against the register? Yeah.
Maponya says the South African Council of Educators, SACE, plays an important role in ensuring that schools' teachers are vetted.
The role of the South African Council of Educators is actually quite critical because one of their responsibilities is to ensure that we have the teaching profession is professional. Does that make sense? So they are supposed to safeguard the profession. And one of the ways of doing that is exactly what you're asking, is to ensure that, I'm going to use the word, to serve as gatekeepers. I mean, I know that's not a very common or like a nice word to use, but part of their responsibility is to ensure that anyone who comes through the door being the South African Council of Educators, must be found to be a fit and proper person to work in our schools, by virtue of not having a criminal record, for example. But most importantly, they must not have been found in the past to be a sex offender. So that has always been there. So what we're doing now is to add another layer to say, you've gone through SACE, they have not found anything wrong with you, but what we are doing now specifically, we're checking against the National Register for Sex Offenders, and the province is also checking against the Child Protection Register to ensure that there's no person with a known case of child abuse that is going to be working in our schools, especially because of what you're saying, in that we are putting our children at harm's way if we are not doing the checks and balances to ensure that everyone who becomes a teacher or who works in our school is an appropriate person to work in that.
Buhle Sibanyoni for SABC News, Pretoria.